Thanks to larger scale international distribution and the internet, Gunpla is more accessible than ever before. Although there are still some shops that have had the same perfect grade Zeta Gundam kit sitting on their shelf for a year and a half at a 300% markup, you know who you are, finding kits in the States that are nearly the same price as they are in Japan merely takes a quick Google search, or simply getting over the fact that you might have to interact with the general public for 5 minutes and taking a short trip to your local hobby shop. Provided that they aren't selling a perfect grade Zeta Gundam for $450, of course. In fact, if you're really on a budget, or if you're just getting started in the hobby, there's a special line of unique kits that might be just right for you. These are a few examples of what is known as SD Gundam, or Gundam SD. No matter how you pronounce it, the SD stands for Super Deformed, as the designs are basically mobile suits with the cheat code for big head mode turned on, whilst being run through a hydraulic press. Sure, they look a bit silly, but that's kind of the point, as the SD line isn't one that's meant to be taken too seriously. After all, the concept originated from fan art submitted by a junior high schooler to a magazine in the 80s. These squat designs inevitably became model kits, which should surprise no one watching this, and are still being produced in strong numbers to this day. Their appeal beyond their quirky designs is that they're quick to build and are far and beyond the cheapest kits on the market. For example, here's my fiance assembling an SD-EX standard Gundam Astray red frame that she picked up the other day for less than a fast food combo meal. Total build time? About an hour or so. Because the concept of animation targeted at an audience that's old enough to understand things like drama and character development was somewhat foreign to Americans for most of the 20th century, it's no surprise that this was also how Sunrise, the studio responsible for the Gundam metaseries, originally wanted to introduce Gundam to the untapped American market, all the way back in 1991. However, instead of, say, bringing its already existing SD Gundam animated shorts stateside, or retelling one of their already existing Universal Century series, or starting a new timeline entirely to entice new viewers, they thought it would be a good idea to bring Gundam to the United States as a Saturday morning cartoon series, marketing itself as a ripoff of its own intellectual property. Sound familiar? The show I speak of was spawned from its writers going out for a bender one Friday night and waking up the next morning in Atlantic City with a nasty hangover. Realizing that they needed to have a new show idea for American children ready for the studio execs by Monday, they turned on the television at their Days Inn at 9 in the morning and started to figure out what their crowning entry into the Western market would be after pounding half a bottle of painkillers left next to the sink. First, they flipped through the channels to find that every show had a multicultural, but not too multicultural presence to cater to every possible demographic, such as jocks, nerds, and minorities. Confident that these are the only possible demographics for American children to fit into, the first characters they came up with for their show about robots were, naturally, the football player and the cheerleader. Clearly, the football player had to be the leader of the group because Americans love football, and this would drive ratings. The cheerleader, also being loosely affiliated with the footballing, would need to be included in the series as well, as their show's development was now off to a flying start and they hadn't yet included a female protagonist yet. This would make them confident that the execs would think them to be very progressive, so they continued brainstorming inclusive characters. Once the pills started to kick in, they found that every show had to have at least one African American person. But they knew that there was a better way to do it than just painting a pre-existing character with a darker skin tone, so they decided to put him in a wheelchair. Ticking the boxes of male protagonist, female protagonist, token African American person, and the
disabled
demographic, the show was already off to a flying start in the development room. After getting their Hot Pockets out of their shared hotel room's microwave, the writers also decided to include a surfer person, because children in America are often found surfing, and an overweight hockey player, because American children are fat, and also Canadian. They had their cast of perfectly unique characters, and now, not wishing to waste time with developing an actual story, they moved on to name their surefire hit. One of the writers suggested using something with the word Gundam in it, But another writer, finishing off his bottle of absinthe from the night before, loudly proclaimed that this would confuse the children's feeble minds since they didn't know what a mobile suit was yet. Before the first writer could remind him that he hadn't actually said anything about mobile suits, he chucked the now empty bottle of absinthe at the man's head. Using the now unconscious writer's fresh head wound as a writing utensil, he scrawled the positively genius name for the show on the wall of the hotel room. And here it is.
Hey kids, get ready for
Doozy Bots!
The squished little robots known as SD Gundam made their debut in 1987 as a bonus track of sorts included with the theatrical release of Mobile Suit Gundam, Char's Counterattack. The shorts would continue with the release of Pat Labor the Movie, another giant robot franchise. The shorts took on a life of their own as they received their own standalone releases with Mobile Suit SD Gundam's Counterattack, a 4-part OVA series entitled Mobile Suit SD Gundam: SD Gundam Legend, the standalone OVA Mobile Suit SD Gundam the Movie: Musha Knight Command: SD Gundam Scramble, and finally the full-length feature Mobile Suit SD Gundam Festival in 1993. Electing to go with none of these properties when bringing SD Gundam, and as a reminder, Gundam as a whole, to the United States, Sunrise created Doozy Bots. All that exists of this today is a failed trailer-esque pilot that promises
bots of action, bots of fun, and bots of kids!
For the summer of 1991. Now, if I'm honest, I can't really tell if he's saying lots of kids or bots of kids at the end there, but our announcer seems very, very excited about the presence of children in a kids show. It's surprising then that this show never made it to production, considering how exciting things looked at the onset. The kids of America were certainly ready, so where did it all go wrong?
There's a spectacular, new comedy action series coming in the fall of 1991. Hey kids, get ready for
Doozy Bots! Meet Professor Doozy, he's a wacky one. He's got a teen science club, and here they come!
First off, we know how effective jingles are in advertising. We had the entire setup ready to go and knew what we were getting into within the first 30 seconds of this trailer. Let's keep going.
Max is the leader of the football squad.
Let's pause right here for a second. Notice how the Rent-A-Choir shouts the characters' names. American children, whose attention spans would have been drastically shortened by 1991 due to violent video games and hippity-hop music, were sure to remember the names of their heroes because of this. Moving on.
He's back and smooth with the super.
Solid use of the slide whistle here. This helps reinforce the tone for the show. Here, we see the slide whistle juxtaposed atop a scene of hard-nosed, high-action sportsing, referencing back 24 seconds to when the show was introduced as an action comedy. Also, notice here that the first two characters we're introduced to are still part of Professor Doozy's wacky science club, thus shattering the stereotype that jocks and popular people are different and or better than science nerds. Very forward-thinking for 1991.
Hucking, roping, winding all that stuff. Scuzzy, just like the name.
Slime, glue, and oozes game.
Check out the strong capitalist values of American children that are also on display here. The fat hockey player tumbles to the ice, but he still ensures that his wealth, which in this case is the candy bars that are stored within his sporting equipment, are safe from the welfare cases bound to be on the other team, who are probably Russians and therefore communists.
Wipe out, search, and hot on his heels. Dang, he's strong and can move those skills.
Notice how the hover surfer is careful to stay inclusive around the wheelchair-bound African-American person. He shows compassion for the
disabled
by refusing to walk around him, and by them passing both through the goalposts together, this enforces that they're equals.
Put 'em all together and
Smart move by the creators here to put the cheerleader behind the football player and thus obscuring half of her body. Not only does this save animation time by not having to draw another set of legs, it ensures that American children understand a girl's place among the boys. Equal, but not quite as equal as everyone else.
what have you got? You've got the Doozy Bots.
When the Clydesville High Science Club was asked to a secret meeting at Professor Doozy's home laboratory, they had no idea they would be asked to volunteer for an incredible experiment.
As we see here, the creators are clearly encouraging exploration and participation in any and all activities that adults ask of them, regardless of consequence.
Sydney, come! Father?
See, without the bubbling beaker, there would be no way for American children to know that the old man with the glasses and long trench coat with paper sticking out of it was a scientist. This was a thoughtful addition by the creators of this pilot, and it ensures that no child gets left behind.
Outside the lab, Tagalong and the obnoxious Brandon were snooping about.
Huh? Hey! Tag along, no fear!
And here we're introduced to the two most important characters in this kind of a pilot, but not really. Tagalong and the obnoxious Brandon emphasize two key points: that breaking and entering is perfectly fine, and that faking it till you make it, notice the sports ball glove on the child's hand, is the best way to get invited to do things with the popular kids, as long as you follow them around at all times.
Huh? Hey! Tag along, no fear!
Additional bonus points here because, unlike in sportsing, taunting in real life is not a penalty and is always encouraged amongst your peers.
Professor Doozy had invented the amazing transmogrification process that can take the intelligence of humans and transfer it into specially designed robots. These Doozy Bots were needed to combat a defective generation of robots that had accidentally escaped from the professor's laboratory. These misguided robots had to be stopped before they carried out their mission to build an army and rob the world of fun.
That line right there is the most important line of this entire trailer. We now have our first taste of what our antagonists are actually after. We know that they're out to rid the world of fun. Due to when this came out, it's likely that this was a reference to the Gulf War, and that the fun is actually an analogy for oil fields and dictatorial corruption. If the show were to be produced, the show's antagonists would likely be using fun as a much-needed resource in their own territory, so they have to come to ours to take it by force, using the weaponry Professor Doozy had armed them with. In fact, if you replace every instance of the word fun with oil in this trailer, you'll find that Doozy Bots is actually a docudrama accounting the events of Operation Desert Storm, and that this very trailer was the inspiration for Jarhead, the 2005 Satellite Award nominee for Best Adapted Screenplay. So, if the sheer genius of this show isn't already apparent to you, just wait until we get into the action next time on the thrilling conclusion of The People versus Doozy Bots. See you next time.